This is Saskia, and this is Note to Self, your weekly dose of everything that's simply too long to text. Consider this your personal invitation into my inner circle, where I share my thoughts, feelings, and quiet reflections that usually live inside my Notes app. Thanks for joining me. Hello, my wonderful listeners. Welcome to Note to Self. I originally had prepped this on a beautiful sunny day, and my intro was talking about how beautiful and sunny New York was and the good vibes, and I didn't record that day and pushed it off, and now it's gloomy and sad. And I was like, guess there goes my intro. It is that classic crazy New York spring weather. Why is it that I feel like every episode I start with, I talk about the weather? It's like so annoying for anyone that doesn't live here. So we're pivoting immediately from that. I had a thought over the last few days. Let's dive right in. And this is by no means a new idea, but I really feel like social media has ruined New York sometimes, a lot of the time, but sometimes. I was walking, Exhibit A, to this new coffee shop that has opened in my neighborhood, and it's called Canyon Coffee. It's an LA outpost, and they have one location in LA. They're mainly a distributor, so they're in like a lot of the coffee shops and sold at like Whole Foods and stuff. But they have a really cute coffee shop in Echo Park, which was close to where Jeffrey used to live. So him and I would love to go there and grab like an afternoon coffee. It was busy, but never crazy. Like you could maybe wait 10 minutes for a coffee, whatever. It was fine. So they opened a location in, New York, their first New York outpost. So was very excited because I love this place. So we were like, let's get up, nice, like early. I was going to say early. I was like, we got up at 8. On Friday, we'll pop in, grab a coffee, have a little morning walk before we start work. So we meander on down there, and there is a goddamn line all the way down the block. Okay, maybe not all the way down, like halfway down the block, which is still far, for a bloody coffee. I was so annoyed. I was like, can a girl just go out to her local coffee shop, grab a coffee and just not be a whole fucking thing? And annoyingly, I think it's because Instagram posted about it, which is also how I found out they opened, but still. I may have discovered it, but I felt I had ownership over it because it was in my neighborhood, which probably everyone did. So it's like Instagram is great because I guess like discoverability, that's wonderful. And I probably wouldn't have found it immediately. But I was just like so bummed out. And I also kept being like, don't people have to work? As I'm standing there at 8:30 also getting ready for my day at work, and we're all remote now. Well, a lot of us are, so we're all in the same position. But it started to get me thinking beyond the irony of that entire situation. Is this thought about social media ruining New York? And I think there's an element of nostalgia I have, and I'll tell you why. So I started watching Love Story, the Carolyn Bessette and JFK Jr. TV show that's currently on Hulu, and I debated not watching it because I had read that kind of the family were a little unhappy about it. It's also Ryan Murphy who created it, and I feel like he just pushes out so much content, and it's either I love it or most of the time I'm like, I don't think it's that good. But he has done some good stuff in the past, and I thought it looked interesting. I really liked the actors in it. So I decided to watch it, taking it all with a very heavy grain of salt, knowing it's very inspired by, because like, how are you really to know the ins and outs of someone's relationship? But I've actually found the show incredibly entertaining. I've absolutely loved it. I thought it is really well done. And again, if you're watching it not as like this is the truth of their entire relationship, I think it's a really beautiful show. And I'm sure there's elements that we're inspired by as well. Anyways, it's set in New York. As we know, this is a real story in the 1990s, which I like to think of as the Sex and the City era of New York. And it's the New York I've always loved. Pre-social media, where you found out where to go from like word on the street. And I didn't live there then. So if anyone is a listener who lived in New York in the 90s, hit me up. Would love to interview you and learn all about it. But really, to me, what it feels like, and when I watch these shows of how they describe New York at that time, it just feels like this presence that wasn't there. And we didn't have this little box that we were always looking at to be constantly entertained. People met in real life. This idea of New York being, I remember when I first moved here, it's like we have these tiny apartments because New York is your living room, right? That still exists, but I feel like back then, I'm sure in the 90s, you really had, and prior to that, that's really what you relied on for your human interaction was the city. The city really was your living room. And I think sometimes when I watch films and TV shows set at that time, I have this like weird nostalgia. It's so hard to explain. It's like I can't look away, and I just feel I have a yearning for that, to wish to live there during that time. And how can I recreate that now? And it just feels like everything I discover now about New York and places I want to go, it's all from videos on social media. You know, those influencer best spots in NYC for a martini, and you watch it and it's literally the same 5 bars that we all know, but knowing full well that there's like a million other bars that are amazing that would have the best martinis that are hole in the walls that didn't pay the influencer to post about them. And not that the ones they're posting about are bad, but I just miss that discoverability. And I think it's there. And I was saying to myself, I want to discover New York again this summer and spend days where you just wander around and see what you stumble into. And I think it's really hard because we're kind of programmed to be like, I want to go to the best spot. And if I'm going to have a burger, I want it to be really good. And I'm going to go on Yelp and quickly Google if the reviews are good before I go into this spot, instead of just kind of trusting your intuition on what you're discovering. And I feel like I do that more when I'm traveling. And so often when I'm traveling, I actually don't always plan out the places I want to go, and I kind of see what I discover, which is a blessing and a curse, because then sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I had actually researched this restaurant and had booked in to go there. But I feel like I have this nostalgia for this pre-social media, which maybe is just presence and how to get that. In the same vein, also just sent a video to my group chat with the girls about this new pierogi and martini bar in Queens that I want to check out. So like the irony, right? I can't. I mean, look, social media is helpful, but maybe there's a way to go back to what that was. Oh, I just want to go back and live in the 90s, guys. What I would give. I think a lot of people do, man. I don't think it's just me. So maybe together we can discover our cities without social media. More to come here. But that's my vent to get going today. The vibes are good though. The vibes are good. New York is still going. There's lots to do. But really, the kind of preamble to my topic today is a little bit of pop culture moments, because we haven't had a lot of pop culture recently. It's been a bit of intense topics. So I want to kick off with a few things that I have been watching. First off, Project Hail Mary. Jeffrey and I went to see Project Hail Mary on Saturday. Wow. This film made me laugh. It made me cry. It had me on the edge of my seat. It brought back that old, big blockbuster feeling from back in the day when the film created just this whole other world. And yes, that happens, but there's just something about the sci-fi epic genre that just I haven't seen done like this in a long time. For those who don't know about it, the movie is based on a book written by Andy Weir. It was released in 2021, so it's not a super old book. I also really want to read it now because I had not read it. Andy also wrote the book The Martian, which they also adapted into a movie with Matt Damon, but it was a different director, and that was a few years ago. But Project Hail Mary stars Ryan Gosling, who plays a character called Ryland Grace, often just called Grace. Without giving away many spoilers, or really I'm not really giving away any, but the movie opens with Grace waking up on a spaceship, totally alone with no memory of who he is or why he's there. And his memory unravels throughout the film. He starts to discover that he must solve this problem of this mysterious substance that is causing the Earth's sun to die. So it kind of also, it goes back and forth between him prior to getting on the ship to how he and him currently on the ship. But he isn't alone. And on his journey, he meets an alien called Rocky. Rocky, guys. Rocky's the best. Rocky is the best. This is so what happens to me is I get so attached to these creatures or these little characters and I cannot let them go. And Rocky is my new obsession. He reminds me of how I felt about Baby Yoda. Grogu, Grogu, so cute. I can't. I need like a Rocky plushie or something. Anyway, the film follows their journey, and I won't go into the rest. But there was two things I really wanted to point out about this film that are really incredible and just props to the filmmaking. So the first thing is it was shot entirely without traditional green screens, which is fucking wild because it means the directors built these massive practical sets for the ship's interior. So they built the actual spaceship, and Ryan is obviously the main actor really in it. He got to act like in this set. It's almost like a play. And they used LED backgrounds. There was like these big LED screens to provide realistic lighting, and they projected like space visuals in the background instead of using any green screens. And it just gave the film such a realistic feel. And I also think it brought you back to these old school sci-fi films that use sets. That was like, I Googled some of the ones that used them back in the day. It was like 2001 Space Odyssey, the first Alien, the original Star Wars. They all used a lot of sets. And sometimes they obviously used special effects. And it wasn't that special effects weren't used in it, but they created a set, which I think is so cool. And how fun for an actor. That would be so cool to be in a sci-fi film and you're dressed up in a spacesuit and you're actually in a spaceship. This is when the sci-fi nerd in me comes out. I'm like, are you kidding me? I get to play around in a spaceship all day? Ryan, I'm very jealous of your job. And you get to play with this alien because, second point, the alien's character, Rocky, was a physical puppet. And it acted with Ryan at all times. So it wasn't, oftentimes when it's these creatures, they superimpose the creature and afterwards, and you're oftentimes just acting with like some weird, like it's like a tennis ball or something that kind of where you put your eye line. And I feel like when they actually use a real creature or puppet or something that they create, like what they did with Grogu in Mandalorian, where it was an actual, I think they used a puppet as well, or maybe it was, a mechanic thing, it allows the actor to really form a connection with this character. Rocky was super interesting because it was this puppet, right? And it had a team of 5 puppeteers, and apparently they called the puppeteers the Rocketeers. So the team was led by a theater artist, and his name is James Orts. And oftentimes when you see Rocky, what the filmmakers were saying was underneath him, like collapsed in these tiny areas, with the puppeteers moving him around. And all of Rocky's emotions, especially at the start, were portrayed by the movement that the Rocketeers created. So they had to build this physical library of emotions. And that's how you're able to understand what Rocky was feeling and what it was trying to communicate with Ryan's character, Grace. So I feel like it did one thing. It gave Ryan a real presence to interact with and build this emotional connection. And what's really cool is apparently the puppet and Ryan were actually able to improvise. So the puppeteers improvised with Ryan as well, which again, you don't get to do with usually these characters unless it's another person. So having that improv is really beautiful and created, again, a ton of authenticity. And then the second part was because Rocky had this physicality to him, I'm not going to gender Rocky, you felt so connected to this creature, which really reminded me of E.T., which was also a puppet. And again, audiences felt so connected to E.T. He was one of the most famous aliens because you were connected to the realism. And I think we lose the nature of a character when we edit it in. It doesn't feel as complex. And I think even the directors, I was reading that they were saying that they would forget that Rocky wasn't actually real. What a dream. You could see the passion in Ryan's character and the joy he was having. There was so much light and levity to the film, but then in the same vein, you're laughing at a joke while also simultaneously crying. It was just the most beautiful relationship that built with these two characters. And to me, it just felt like a masterpiece. And it ran 2.5 hours long. I was enthralled the entire time. Ryan's character, Grace, had a huge emotional arc where he went from this fearful, lonely, defensive man to a brave, selfless hero. It's a hero's story. And with that transformation, the audience is also taken on your own emotional arc. I felt, like I said, I was laughing, I was crying, I was smiling, I was, when something's so cute, your body's like crunching up almost. There was so many moments. There was fear, and it really took you on a journey. I was so entertained. And ultimately, the story is about friendship and the strength that is found in connection rather than doing it alone. And is that a message that we need right now? My God, it is. We should not be doing things alone, and it's all about community and the people around you. So if you haven't seen it, go and see it. This is why we go to the movies, is to see movies like this on the big screen. It's so fun. You will enjoy it whether you're a sci-fi fan or not, I think, because the message underneath is just fun for everyone. And it is definitely a movie I could see myself rewatching for most of my life. So was very happy with that one. Props to Ryan Gosling. Love you. You always do great work. Really hope you're listening. So one day, Ryan, maybe. I'll have him on the pod, guys. I'll have him on the pod. Let's manifest it. Moving on to my next topic of pop culture, staying in the kind of fantasy sci-fi realm, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. This is the new Game of Thrones universe show, which is on HBO. It's already finished. It came out, I think it wrapped up like a month or two ago. So I'm a bit late to the game, but I wanted to talk about it. So it's set before the events of Game of Thrones, but after House of the Dragon. And it follows the story of Sir Duncan the Tall, a hedge knight, and Egg, his squire. Okay, can't wait to tell you guys this. So it's set in the age where the Targaryen line still held the Iron Throne. I think this might be my favorite Game of Thrones show ever. The tone is really different from the previous shows. It's so much lighter, and at times it almost feels like a comedy. And I saw some clips from an old Game of Thrones episode where one of the kids is asking for a bedtime story. This was like the original Game of Thrones show, and it was one of the children lying in bed. Can I have a bedtime story? And the child goes, one of the stories of Sir Dunk the Tall and his squire Egg. Suffice to say, the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, or 9 if you want to be precise. For those who've watched the show, you know what I mean. It became a bedtime story for children in the future. So as I mentioned, this is prior to Game of Thrones. So these stories of Sir Duncan the Tall and his squire become these bedtime stories for children. So part of me wondered if the reason they chose to shoot the show with more comedic elements and really, feeling lighter is to lean into that childlike fantasy of listening to these stories. The episodes are also only 30 minutes long, and all of the other Game of Thrones, like Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, are hour-long episodes. Our hour-long episodes often indicate drama, whilst a 30-minute show often represents comedies or sitcoms. So I thought that was a very interesting choice as well. My other call-out is the chemistry between the two lead actors. Peter Claffey, who plays Sir... Claffey? Yeah, Peter Claffey, I think. We'll see. Who plays Sir Dunk the Tall, and Dexter Salt Ansel, who plays Egg. Oh, most angelic child you'll ever see. Dexter is 11, and he plays the sweetest, sassiest, bravest character ever. He's so cute. How I feel about Rocky is how I feel about Egg. I love this kid, man. And Peter is this very, very tall man who has this looming presence, but he is the definition of a gentle giant. He deeply cares about the people around him, and you just immediately fall in love with this funny, very unexpected friendship with two very unlikely duo. I binged the show in almost one viewing. I just couldn't stop. And every time Egg was on screen, I just couldn't handle it. Jeffrey didn't know what I was watching. He was coming into the room and I was like, oh my God, Egg! Ah! Losing my mind. He was like, what are you watching? Anyways, I've seen so many online videos also being like, we must protect this kid at all costs. And I agree. I totally agree. He's amazing. So for those who like fantasy and generally just great storytelling, I highly encourage you to watch this show. You will get through it so fast. You don't have to have watched the previous Game of Thrones shows to understand it. It's so lighthearted. There's also like some like darker elements as classic Game of Thrones they have, but it is just such a beautiful story of friendship. Again, another friendship story. Shrinking, third one. We're pivoting fast. I also have been watching the new season of Shrinking on Apple TV. God, this is such a good show. For those who haven't seen it, Jimmy is played by Jason Segel. Jason Segel. Oh, guys, you know I'm not good with names. He's a therapist and a single dad who's struggling with the loss of his wife. The show follows this support network of colleagues who are more like family, and they're all therapists, neighbors, their patients, and his daughter as they all navigate loss or navigate different things in their life. Three of the main characters are therapists, so you follow their practice and their patients. So each episode always has this kind of underlying or overt therapeutic message. So we're on season 3 now, and in the recent season, this is not a spoiler, but Paul, who is played by Harrison Ford and is the eldest therapist at the practice, and a close friend to the main character, Jimmy, is taking an emergency session with Jason's daughter, Jimmy's daughter, Alice. So Alice explains how she has made a big deal about being done with therapy. You've seen her go through therapy the last few seasons. And then she has this tiny problem and she comes running back to Paul and she just says she feels like a failure. And Paul says to her, I quote, "Life has a way of making sure you are never really done with this stuff. At least now you know. You can get through it on your own if you have to, but hear this, you never have to." Messages like this are scattered everywhere in this show. And I thought this one was so incredibly important to share, though, because we're so often sold this idea that we need to finish and that there's an end point of something and that something isn't a success unless it's finished. And I've spoken about this before in my episode on the search for perfection and how perfection really is the killer to joy. And this search for perfection is so not real because everything is a work in progress. So if your life is a work in progress, shouldn't your mental health also be a work in progress? And there isn't a finish line. So this idea that she has about feeling that she had to finish it, therapy's never finished. There's always something new to discover. Like you said, life is a way of making sure you're never done with this stuff. And ultimately it is a lifelong process. And I've been thinking more and more about how one of the few things we can control in life is how we show up in the world. And the best way we can do that is to learn about yourself. Deal with your shit so you aren't walking around inadvertently putting your stuff on other people. That, to me, is the best way to be a human in this world. And we spend all this time and money going to the gym and the doctors and all these things to look after our physical health. And I just don't understand why looking after our mental health isn't put in the same bucket. You don't need problems to start therapy. Trust me when I say that. I've started it when I've had problems and then stopped. I've started it when I've had nothing. And I think I've coming to a stage in my life where I'm realizing it's just always going to be a part of my life. And I've uncovered stuff that I didn't even realize was affecting me. So I feel like this message is just so important. And I love this show for putting that out there. And again, time back, all 3 of these shows, it's about friendship and not doing it alone. And you don't have to do it alone, just like your mental health. Your mental health journey shouldn't be something you're doing alone. Pay someone to do it with them and a professional that can help you and show up better in this world. Because I think if we kind of all spent more time investing in our mental health, maybe we'd have a bit more of like a empathy and a calmer society and have more time for one another. Because I feel like so much of the issues right now is we just don't have empathy or kindness for one another. So it's interesting that I found the 3 things I've gravitated to over the last month have really been stories around unlikely friendships and learning from other people and not doing it alone. And that, I think these stories are clearly resonating with people because maybe that message is what people need to hear right now. Which really brings me to my topic at hand, because we are not at the topic of today yet. But what I wanted to talk about is couples therapy, because couples therapy is also something that you don't have to do alone. And really, it's all about learning not to do it alone. And I really wanted to hone in on this because I have found a lot of people have been very interested and asking about Jeffrey and I doing couples therapy. And as many of my listeners who've been here for a while, they'll know that my partner Jeffrey and I started couples therapy about a month into our relationship. And I brought the idea to him because I had read prior to us dating from a lot of relationship therapists how important it is, if you can, to start couples therapy early on as a way to really build a good foundation. And it really helps, with good communication. And I knew Jeffrey was the right person. This was one of the signs is that he was the right person because he was so open to giving it a go. And we've been continuing it ever since, along with our individual therapy as well. And today I wanted to go and share my top 3, or maybe our top 3 takeaways that we're having right now. Because there's so many things I could talk about that we've learned, but there's kind of 3 things we're really focusing on at the moment that I thought might be helpful to share with our listeners. And before I dive in, I think it's important to note that this has been a journey for us and we are nowhere near perfect, and nor is that our goal. And most of this we're still working on. So I'm sharing this knowing that this is a work in progress, and some of this we're good at, some of it we are not good at. But maybe by me sharing, it will help those who also are going through similar things and might need it in their relationships. So really, we'll start out with number 1. So the first thing I wanted to dive into of my 3 takeaways is my first takeaway that I've got from couples therapy is your relationship is like a seedling. You need to nourish it for it to grow. This might not be relevant for more established couples, but a tree can always be blown away by a really big storm. I thought that was a really good one. I came up with that, guys. Anyways, it's true though. You can have a great root system, and sometimes you can have something crazy happen in your life that really can affect that system. So I feel like this idea of nourishing your relationship for it to grow is relevant no matter what stage of the growth you're in. And really what it all comes back to is just nurturing connection. And that can be through date nights, practicing gratitude, even time apart can nurture connection. And I think being very conscious of how you fight. And when you do fight, to always know you're protecting that seedling and not to stamp all over it. Now, again, this is a work in progress. We both, in my relationship, we both get very stuck in our own shit and we can stamp all over our little seedling. And it's something that we're really trying consciously not to do and to continue to provide nourishment. So some things that we're doing right now and stuff that our therapist has shared with us and directed us to do to help nourish this. Date nights. Simple. This is not like a new thing, but we're really bad at this. It's so hard because life gets so busy. And then I find that I'm living with my roommate rather than my partner. So we're really trying hard right now to have a date night every 2 weeks and getting something in the calendar, even every week if we can do it, just to have that time outside of our apartment without our phones. I mean, our phones come with us, but don't pull your phones out. That's more on Jeffrey than it is on me. That man is addicted to his phone. But putting our phones away. Maybe it's, going to the movies or going for a walk, like anything. It doesn't have to be a whole date night, but just something that is time together. I also really love holidays together and, without other people, which Jeffrey and I travel a lot. We're constantly traveling. A lot of the time it's to see people or it's with friends. So it's sometimes hard to have just time, the two of us. But we've made a concerted effort the last few years is to do a trip, just the two of us. And it's been some of my favorite memories with him. And I was saying to him even now, I was like, I'm really craving like just a trip with you and to the two of us. And sometimes that's not possible. So we're trying to think it's like maybe we do a little weekend away or something that can just be us. Maybe it's even exploring your own city because if you live in a city, there's always so many things you can do. And even if you're not in a city, exploring nature that's around you. So that's something that we're also trying to look into. And again, it's like dedicated time. The other thing that we're actively doing, which was guidelines from our therapist, was practicing gratitude. So our therapist gave us this exercise where every night before we go to sleep, we have to share 3 things that we love about the other person, or 3 things that they've done that day that we loved. It could be anything from, something that they did that day, something that you noticed about them, something that you love about them. So really just 3 things you're grateful for about your partner. And having that set time every night has been so lovely, and getting into bed and you share that, and then you go about your own routine. We do forget a lot. So I ordered us sticky notes to put on our bed frame so we remember to do it. But I know that, it's like a month to build a routine, and you just need to be consistent with it, and then a week to break it. So building that consistency, and then it starts to become something that you crave. So that's something that we're starting to do more and more. Now, this is something else that I think encourages connection. Wasn't actually shared from our therapist, but I read about it and I want to ask her about it in our next session. But it's this idea of intentional separation, where once a month you do this thing. It's like couples are doing this thing where they have 48 hours of complete separation. They were saying, I saw it on Instagram, and they were saying it was like Icelandic couples, but when I Googled it, apparently Icelandic couples do this, but when I Googled it, there's no information that this is true about Icelandic couples. So I removed that. I think it's more just like a general relationship technique that people are talking about. I have no idea how Icelandic couples entered the conversation, but I thought that was a funny thing to note. Anyways, so what it is like this full physical separation. Originally, it started out as 2 days with no contact, no text, no calls. And the idea is that it can reintroduce novelty into your routine. Like, think about it. You're always in your routine, living together, and having this moment where you're apart. It builds this longing, and you're wanting to come back together, this yearning that I think a lot of us are craving in life. And then it strengthens individuality. It gives you time for yourself, reduces reactive conflict because you're allowed to breaks the pattern that you're in. You can calm your nervous system and kind of help break these repetitive arguments that you might be getting into. And it creates a moment for reflection. And when I looked into this a little further, most therapists actually recommend to do a lighter version of that. So they were saying, some people, this might trigger abandonment anxiety. So really, this has to be something that works for you and your partner, and something you both agree to do. But if you are both interested, you could start it in like a much smaller way, where you could do 24 hours apart, or you could do a solo day or night, or a solo hobby or trip. And I like that concept because I think 48 hours seem like a lot. We all have very limited time, and 1 weekend a month, especially if you have kids, I can imagine that would be really hard to do. But giving yourself solo time, and if you have kids, maybe one of you watches the kids and then you have your solo time or whatnot. But I can understand how that time apart, I think, is really interesting. That one of the techniques to build connection is to also have time apart. Because as someone who really values my alone time, oftentimes I feel a lot more connected when I've had my time apart, because I've had some time to just reset and think and just relax in a way. And then always, whenever Jeffrey goes, I always immediately miss him. But I think that's a good thing because it creates that yearning as well. And the last kind of little technique here that we use under this umbrella, this is a big one for Jeffrey and I know, is what our therapist says is removing the back door. We've all been there when you're in a fight and the only thing you can think of is to threaten to leave. I am a very dramatic person, for those that know me very well. The girl loves to add the drama into fights. So this is one that I'm definitely working on. But our therapist has made such a good point that even saying this when you don't mean it, and I never do mean it, it's damaging your little seedling or your plant or your tree. So I think one of the big things is removing that back door. And I even feel like intellectually, when I've told myself that back door isn't there, I feel like already safer and stronger in my relationship, knowing that I choose to be here and there isn't a way out in a way. And we always have a way out, but I think it's just a better way to be more present and, again, nurture connection. Jumping into the next bucket of my takeaways. So the next thing that I have learned from couples therapy is emotional self-responsibility. So what is this? Your partner is not responsible for your emotions. I think a big takeaway for me and my partner, Jeffrey, has been self-responsibility when it comes to feeling frustrated. And this means that when you reach a point of frustration with your partner, it is on you, not your partner, to communicate this frustration. And if you need to take time away or step aside, you do that. Because the goal is always to encourage connection, not to deter it. So let's keep building on this, because what does that really mean? So say you're in an argument and you're both feeling very frustrated. Taking time to leave the conversation in a loving way and allow both of your nervous systems to calm down. Something I've realized in this is Jeffrey needs a much longer processing time than me. So I've had to learn to give him that time and allow him to come back when he's ready. Again, this is a work in progress because I'm always someone that wants to immediately fix it, and I can kind of process my emotions in the moment. Sometimes I need, to step away, but I can figure it out pretty fast. And I think I've learned that I need to allow him to have his time as well, or else we're not going to have meaningful dialogue. And additionally, if you're feeling frustrated, that's also your responsibility. And let's go beyond that. Those moments of frustration are also a moment to self-reflect. Why is it that I am so annoyed? What is beneath this and what is triggering for me? Because it's really easy to blame our partner for X, Y, and Z. And oftentimes I've found, at least, there's always something beneath that as to why we're really annoyed that's worth examining for yourself. Our therapist calls it the dance. And when you're arguing, it isn't often about what you're actually arguing about. Oftentimes you're both in your own narrative, in your own story. You're not in your emotional truth. You're up here in this frequency. And I personally can feel it. I can feel when I'm in a fight and I'm like, oh, just like yelling all these things out or whatever. None of it is really, it's all a story. It's not actually the emotional truth as to what's going on, because the emotional truth feels more grounded and more solid to be able to share what you feel. When I feel myself get up here, I know that I'm not in my emotional truth. And you're both in your own stories. And oftentimes you'll find, and what I've learned through therapy, is your story and your partner's story are often this perfect dance. They perfectly trigger one another. And Jace Shetty calls it the mirror. And I've spoken about this before. And oftentimes we're attracted to people who trigger moments from our lives, often moments from our parents. And we're subconsciously trying to fix that childhood trauma or that childhood trigger that we had with our parents, with our partner. It doesn't have to be a negative trauma. It's just that relationship. No relationship with a child and parent is perfect. And there's always things that are there, nuances. And oftentimes you're attracting a partner who exhibits similar behaviors that you had with your parents, and you're trying to mend that. So you get into these dances, or again, what Jay Shetty calls the mirror, where you're reflecting back, your partner's reflecting back to your deepest wounds. And these are actually some of the best relationships if you can work through it for growth, because you can help each other heal in a really beautiful way. This is why I think therapy and human attraction is the most interesting thing, because it's such a window into personal development and personal growth. But the part here is that it is your responsibility. That frustration, those feelings, it's all self-responsibility, and it's not on your partner to have to manage. But again, this is all a work in progress, and it's something that we're learning. But when we get into these arguments, both him and I are trying to remind ourselves of that, is that approach it with loving care, take time apart, and look at it from what is ours to hold and what's it telling both of us. Which kind of goes into the last piece here that we're leaning into right now. The last piece of what we're currently learning in couples therapy is you don't win by being right. So my partner, Jeffrey, and I are incredibly stubborn people. We really mirror each other, and we both always want to be right. But our therapist said to us, you don't win by being right. And rationally, we know this. But man, it's really hard to back down when you're in it. But something a friend shared with me that I thought was really, really helpful. And she said it helped her and her partner a ton, because they would fall into the right game. She shared that their couples therapist recommended this approach, that when fighting, But for someone to take a beat, soften your face and smile, grab your partner's hand and tell them that you love them, make a joke, change the narrative, lighten the mood, remind both of you why you're here, which is to nourish connection and that you love each other. Despite this argument that you're in and this anger that you're feeling, there's love behind it all. And love is really what is at the root of all of it, beyond this narrative and this story and this dance that we get into. She said it was really hard to do because you both want to be right, but one person has to budge. And she decided to be the one that she was going to budge. And she told me that when she started incorporating these tactics, she found a huge change in the way her partner and her communicated and the way they fought. And she said that fights become shorter and they're more loving and they're calmer. And immediately imagine you're in the middle of the fight and someone looks at you and softens their face and says, I love you. Like that changes the dynamic. How are you meant to respond? It's going to soften you as well. So this is something very tangible that we want to start incorporating. And again, my therapist has brought this up to us before. And I think it's just such a great tactic. But again, it's self-responsibility. So much of this is on you and how you can change. And it's definitely hard. No one's perfect. We all fall back into it. But these were just 3 buckets that I really feel like are things that we're leaning into right now. And I hope that they could help other people no matter what stage you're in. Because really, like, as we're starting to wrap up here, everything is a work in progress. We're a work in progress. I'm a work in progress. Everything is. But I'm really proud of how Jeffrey and I have approached our relationship with such intention. And I love tactics. I think we need to share more about what works for different couples and, how couples overcome different struggles. When my friend shared this with me, it made me feel so seen because I was sharing an argument Jeffrey and I had gotten into over the weekend. And it felt so nice to have a friend be like, oh, we went through something similar and this is what we did. And it was so lovely to have that visibility and to not feel so alone in it. And the fact that, it doesn't mean that like your relationship is damaged because you argue. It's actually very healthy. But like I said, all of this is things that we're slowly implementing and learning. And something that I kind of wanted to close on, a little thing to share, is that over the weekend when we were in this fight, we decided to implement what we're calling our relationship book. So we each have a little notebook where we write down our commitments to each other. So some of the things I shared above are the 3 kind of lessons or 3 commitments that we have made to each other, where we've co-written them down and we've co-created them together. We sign them and we read them to each other, almost like your mini vows in a way. And if we're ever in a fight, we say if someone wants to bring the book out and read them, we have to listen and be present and remind each other of these commitments. And you keep adding. It's your relationship book. You keep adding, creating commitments, things you're focusing on. And it just felt like the most beautiful moment to really feel like we were nurturing the seedling and co-creating together and taking time for one another. And I really share this because it's just the idea that any practice can work. And really, I feel like a lot of it is ritualizing your connection and just being kind to each other and also working on your shit, because that's the best thing, again, you can do, I think, in this world, is to work on your stuff as well. And the way it'll impact your relationship is also really helpful. Your relationship shouldn't be built alone. And that goes for leaning on your community and your friends and also your partner, of course. But it ties back to what this whole episode is really about, which is about connection. And I feel like we are living in a world where we can often feel very alone. And the power of storytelling right now and what people are resonating with are these stories of connection. And I hope you feel connected through this podcast, because that's why I started it, is to share stories to make people feel less alone. And really, that is all what today is about. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Happy to have you with me always. And I will see you all next week. Bye. Oh, like and subscribe, guys. Please rate the podcast. Love you.